Gospel of Mark, chapter 2, and for the longevity of the text, I'm just going to read a couple verses, but begin at verse 1 all the way through 12. Read it in your own devotional time, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to read verse number 3 and verse number 4. According to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2, verse 3, and it reads, "And they come unto him, bringing one sick of the palsy, which was born of 4. And when they could not come nigh unto him for the press," that word press in the original language literally means crowd, "they uncovered the roof where he was. And when they had broken it up, they let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsy lay." I want to preach real quick from the thought and the theme, that's what friends are for. As we pick up in our text this morning, we discover the Bible declares that Jesus had just returned. Some translations said he had some days he had returned to Capernaum. Capernaum was considered to be Jesus' headquarters for his Galilean ministry. Unbeknownst to Jesus, oftentimes when he comes back to Capernaum, Jesus normally likes to get some R&R, some rest and relaxation. This time that was not the case, because as Jesus had come back from 12 months of rigorous ministry and evangelizing the area of Galilee, Jesus arrives back to Peter's house in Capernaum. And another thing I got to tell you about Capernaum is considered to be Jesus' city. It is his city because when he went back to his own received him not. In other words, he was kicked out of his own territory, rejected from his own people, and then someone had the audacity and the sagacity to allow Jesus to set up shop in Capernaum. Can I pause right there parenthetically, because there's somebody here this morning, somebody or someplace or something rejected you, and simply because they rejected you, you turned out to be somebody else's blessing. So Capernaum is blessed because where Jesus came from rejected him. It's a danger in rejecting something that's worth more than money can buy. Let me get back to the text where the Bible declares that Jesus had arrived back to Capernaum, and it was noise that he was in the house. Remember, Jesus came back for some R&R. But you know, crowds show up when they want to see something awesome. Some of you have season tickets to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and you crowd and pour into the stadium. Some of you drive to Orlando to see the Orlando Magic play basketball, and the crowd just pours in. Some folk go to high school football games, high school basketball games. You go to concerts. Matter of fact, I think it was a comedy show on Friday night, and some of you might have been there with the rest of the crowd. But the difference in this crowd and the crowd you are amongst is that you went for entertainment that you had to pay for. Well, the difference with this crowd is they came because they heard the man of God had a word from on high to bless their life. And is there anybody in here this morning, you didn't come as a football crowd, you came like this crowd in the text because you knew the man of God had a word for your life. And the text says, Jesus is in the house trying to chill. But unbeknownst to him, the proud showed up. And the Bible declares, around verse 2, that the crowd, it was so many people in the church and outside the church, it was a packed house. It was filled to capacity because the man of God had a word for the people. Now there's certain kind of people in the crowd. There are some folk who just come to take a look. Then there are some folk who come to get a healing. then there are some people just show up to see what somebody else wearing this Sunday, or somebody else who they came to church with. But in the midst of the crowd, the Bible says there was a man sick of the palsy, carried by 4. And when they showed up carrying this man on this cot, some translations call it a pallet, some calls it a bed, but some call it a mat. But when they showed up, they could not get into church because of the press or the crowd. How many times have we blocked people from trying to get into the church house to get their word, to get their healing, simply because we just showed up just to show up? Text says, when they get to the door, matter of fact, they couldn't get to the door because there were so many people inside the house and outside the perimeter of the house. The Bible says that these brothers get creative. And if you're writing down and you want points today, the first thing that I notice is when these brothers encountered a crisis to take this man to see Jesus they carried him. See, true friends won't allow you to stay in a place of misery and mediocrity. True friends who love you, who will lay down their life for you, will put what they have going on the back burner just to come and see about you. So they carried him, but they couldn't carry him in the house. The Bible says they went on the rooftop. And you have to understand, in Judaic culture, homes were made like they're made now. They were flat roofs made of clay and stubble and straw. And alongside of the house, they had a stairwell that you had to walk up if you wanted to enjoy the sun in the evening time. So in other words, Pastor Pratt, they had to put the brother, take him up the stairs, 4 men going upwards, and the text doesn't suggest how big this brother is. The text does not suggest what their names were. All the text said is one man was sick and he was carried by 4. Can I pause right there real quick? Pastor, they didn't have their names called. The Bible doesn't even mention their names. The Bible mentions the man, unfortunately, based by his condition. And the text says these 4 unknown men to us carries this man on the roof. And when they get to the rooftop, they start to work it. The text says they start to dig. And in my study, I discovered there are 4 layers of clay. So they had to put some work in. They had to dig. They had to get sweaty. Not for their miracle, but for the miracle of their friend. Text says, it's in the text. Say when they could not come now, they went to the rooftop, broke it up, and let down. Wherein the sick of the palsy. See, you have to be willing to break some barriers in order to get your breakthrough. They carried him. Then when they carried him and lowered him down into the house, then Jesus cleared him. What you talking about, preacher? Look at verse 5. Verse 5 says, watch this now. See, these are the kind of friends you need. Verse 5 says, when Jesus saw their faith. See, the problem is you can't get blessed because who's in your circle. You might have faith, but they're faithless and fickle. I don't need fake, phony, T-Nightshade folk in my circle. I need some folk who can open me up to get me a miracle. Because when I'm going through,